Hi, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Jeremy Hollow and I'm the CEO and the founder of Listen and Learn Research. If you haven't come across Listen and Learn before, we are a specialist social insight agency. So our job really is to try and make sense of all the nonsense that's on social media and help people think better. People think more creatively, more strategically, help your sort of the way you think about things from an innovation point of view. And it's really all about using humans to understand people, harnessing the power of what's going on in social media so you can understand people better. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to look at something I'm particularly interested in, which is the world of TikTok, which is kind of just really it hasn't come out of nowhere, but it's felt like it has a little bit and really turned a lot of things on their head. The reason why we got interested in TikTok started about a year ago, where we're starting to see some really interesting demand signals coming from a bunch of different sectors where we could see TikTok influence having really significant impact on how consumers were buying. And that sort of led us to think, okay, right, how do we get into this? So what TikTok is many things. From one thing, it's a platform, right? It's an opportunity for people to engage in content. So therefore, you're going to get advertisers wanting to get involved in that as well. And so that begs the question is, how do we target advertising? How do we make any content that we put across or any paid content that we put into TikTok work for us in the best way possible? And then there's also a bigger question here, which is around what are we learning from TikTok? Like TikTok is nothing but bringing together sometimes millions of people around a single community of interest. And that is incredibly powerful. We're thinking about how do we identify new audiences. What we're going to do today is just talk through TikTok, but we're going to use Booktok as an example and as a case study of that. We're going to show you some successes. We're going to show you a little bit about actually what's TikTok about, because we've heard a lot about it, and we can show you some ways that it's influencing demand and sort of lifting authors from the obscurity and thrusting them to the very top of the top seller lists. But we actually want to get a glimpse and help you understand actually what can we learn about audiences when we get into it. Run through this as always. This recording will be live. This session will be recorded so you can watch it back. We've got a great report that the team have put together that supports this work, and it's got loads of amazing videos in it that we can't show you today, but they're in that deck. And then after today, we're going to have a little pause. We've had some great content through all of this year so far. We're going to have a little bit of pause over the summer while we refresh our creative minds, and then we'll be back in the autumn with some new webinar series and some new fresh content. So stay posted. Okay, TikTok. Where did it start, right? So this is one of the first questions we looked at. And it's amazing because it's not that old, so we can trace it back. So once upon a time, there was a young mum named Kathy. And she had this idea, right? She wanted to share her favorite book recommendations with the rest of the world. And I love her persistence. For 79 days in a row, she posted under the hashtag Booktok. But poor Kathy, she didn't really get a lot of traction in that first post, only receiving like just over 1,000 likes. Then a teenager called Kate decided to sort of discovered Booktok and decided to make a post under Booktok. And her post was all about the LGBTQ plus books that she loved. And her first post got 37,000 likes. So we see that Kathy may have started Booktok, but Kate found the right audience. And from that, it grew. After this moment, everything really changed. Booktok videos started booming because they tapped into what many young adults' pent-up desire to share their love of books and share their love of literature and the jokes about reading and all the things that go around the emotional aspects of and experiences of reading. They just wanted to share it. And this is coming out of, this is in the heart of the pandemic as well, where teenagers, particularly young adults, weren't able to sort of mix in quite the same way as they would have done. So just like that, from March 2020, Booktok became a cultural phenomenon. And throughout this work, we try to pull it out. Okay, what's the point for brands? And I know we've got some publishers on the call, but also so brands beyond the world of publishing. What it means is like trends can come out of the blue, like completely out of the blue, and TikTok can make them into significant commercial opportunities. Like Booktok didn't exist beforehand. It does now, and it's massive. So what's it doing? What kind of influence is Booktok having? Well, Booktok's grown way beyond what Kathy and Kate could have ever imagined. From absolutely nothing, Booktok has amassed over 54 billion views, right? That's eye-wateringly huge. I can't even begin to comprehend how big a number that is. Some of the biggest reflect what's the heart of Booktok. So the sub-communities that have come out of Booktok. So you get spicy Booktok, A lot of Booktok is about romance novels, spicy novels, sexy novels. That's got about 720 million views. While also the other side of it is the romance Booktok, which is focused on love at first sight or a second chance at love. And that's currently got close to 500 million views. So you've got this big community, and within it, you've got massive sub-communities within it. So in terms of the commercial impact, we're hearing from publishers that they say the popularity of readers discussing their books on TikTok has really helped lift sales to record levels in the UK. We're saying that in the US, sales of young adult fiction novels have increased 70% in 2021. And we've also seen research that UK book buyers were, such as UK book buyers were Booktok users in 2021, rising to 37%. So we're seeing some really big increases coming across from Booktok in itself. And that's really at the heart of the commercial side. So if you're thinking about why do we invest in Booktok, why should we bother understanding what's happening in these spaces across TikTok? That's kind of the point, right? If what's happening is creating massive sale, then that's your model right there. Understand what's driving this growth, engage with it in the right way, create demand. So who's hanging out in Booktok? What's it all about, right? It's a sanctuary for young women. Like, Booktok is a safe place where young women coming of age can share and discuss life and all of its complexities. They talk about the books they prefer to read are predominantly romance, and the more details, the better. And when we say details, you kind of know what I mean, right? It's spicy details. They're looking for models of behavior or frameworks that's going to help them interpret how to behave, what intimate relationships mean, finding their way around that incredibly murky area of intimate relationships for young adults. It's helping them answer this question, like, when I finally get a real boyfriend, what should I expect? Booktokers are not necessarily down with the status quo. They're okay with being slightly different. They don't have to be the same as everyone else. They're not looking for fairy tale love stories. What they want to actually is to read nuanced, complex relationships where happy ever after is the end game, but they know it's just not the snap of a fingers and there you are. Generally speaking, right, all of us would love to have Booktokers as our daughters. They're amazing. They're the kind of daughters that every mum would love to have. And though we might think that Booktok might be one of the last bastions of wholesomeness on social media, it might be a bit of a stretch, but the characteristics of the people that are on there they are thoughtful young women who love to read and share their viewpoints, generally with civility. Bullying or shaming is just simply not allowed. It's just really stamped out on Booktok. By the way, they also love coffee and not afraid to admit that they like school. So that's a flashpoint persona of what the young adults on Booktok are like. I talked before a little bit about some of the impact, and I just want to share a couple of stories that sort of bring that to life quite wonderfully, I think. So imagine this, right? You're the author of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It was published years ago, and then all of a sudden in March 2021, Taylor Jenkins Reid was sitting at home, and she gets an email from her agent telling her that the book has now hit the New York Times bestseller list. Like, it was published ages ago, right? They hadn't been marketing it, and all of a sudden it's had a Kate Bush moment. It's #1 again. Obviously she was thrilled, she's delighted, but mostly just surprised. As I said, it was published in 2017, and everyone didn't really quite get what was going on. So they're scrambling around just going, oh, how did that happen? And nobody really had any answers. Nobody could figure it out. And then her manager calls her and says, look, have you looked up your book on TikTok? The post tagged with the title had 160 million views and counting. In January 2022, earlier this year, it was #5 on Amazon's bestseller list, and most recently was #3. This is an incredible staying power for a book that was published 5 years ago and that had already come off the top seller lists. So when you think about what this means, right, Booktokers are asking for more like this. And so far, very few have been able to find any books that are really comparable. So if we're writing books, and if we're publishing books, and if we're a retailer of books, there's a big demand signal for you right here. The next one here is the Spanish love deception, which is interesting. I was going to say that the trope before was same-sex romance. The trope here is around enemies to lovers, which is a really popular trope within Booktok. I love this quote: "Shut up what you're doing. Sorry, stop what you're doing. Shut up and read this book." And here we're starting to see some really sort of influential Booktokers getting involved and sharing their recommendations with their audiences. So in this case, Ayman sharing with almost 700,000 readers. This book smacked my ass like a drum. It's still one of my favorite quotes of the year. This book was initially self-published, right? So no fanfare, nothing behind it. Imagine just how hard it is to get a self-published book anywhere. But when it went viral on TikTok, it was picked up by a major publishing house. The story combines the tropes of enemies to lovers, fake relationships, wedding date drama, international vacations, all of the great tropes of Booktok. You should expect the perfect ratio of high levels of plot matched with very high levels of smut. The opportunity here is around green shoots. It's about spotting early signals. If something's got a significant following on TikTok, it's really worth a look, because as this case proves, if you can pick it up at the right time, you're the publisher, you're the retailer, you're the brand that got hold of the next thing. And TikTok is a way of thinking about that. And there are lots of tools, and we can help you think about how to spot those trends and how to monitor them over time. So a couple of examples of where books that have come from relative obscurity or from much lower down in the best-selling charts that have suddenly been catapulted into significant sales volume through the act of TikTok. So what's sort of the common threads on TikTok? I think after the chaos of the last few years, romance novels are a refuge for young adults at this stage, particularly those on Booktok. What it's done is it's kind of popularized reading romance. So I think there's a desire for something that's really sort of predictable and comforting. And at this stage, I'm just going to go into a little bit more about what Booktokers are like and the characteristics of the Booktok conversation. These books are full of things that they haven't done, and but they're things that they think about and that they imagine for their older selves. They're full of relationships that are really messy, they're imperfect, they're frustrating, full of sexual tension and drama. It's for people who may be at the cusp of it, or their friends been in this situation, but it's not something that they're not mature in this sense. And what they've done is that they're sort of looking to these books to help them prepare and perhaps have a chance to write a better ending for themselves by understanding the complexities and some of the dynamics. It's a sense of very formative, very sort of coming of age, very sort of inspirational. Formative is the right word. They like storylines that they can relate to, right? So it's competitive boyfriends, it's parent trouble, it's the handsome new guy on the scene that their best friends noticed, it's the intelligent and imperfect girl that finally gets her way. They like tropes that allow them to explore what kind of some of their deepest personal thoughts. So this could include things like same-sex romance, the idea of leaving home, moving to different countries, all of these things that can seem incredibly daunting, incredibly exciting at the same time, all of that promise of being a young adult. Booktokers like to also discuss with each other a lot about what they would do in similar situations when they encounter particularly troubling intimate encounters in the books that they've read. It provides almost like mini case studies of how their future selves might behave in the situations that their future selves might find themselves in. And this is what I mean when I say that this is a community that found each other. There's lots of similarities around their passions and their interests and what's brought them together. And they wouldn't have been able to do that without TikTok. I think the opportunities here is around understanding that taste, needs, context, what's going on in people's lives are definitely going to evolve over time. But Booktok as a community is what helps you keep track and keep your finger on the pulse of those changes. So what makes a good romance novel? We know that Booktok is at its heart of it is sort of smutty romance. It's a load of things. It's very strong sort of Taylor Swift element to it, very strong sort of enemies to lovers tropes coming through. And to say that finding references to Taylor Swift lyrics in romance novels has replaced looking for Wally and Where's Wally. It's become a hobby for them, and a more grown-up hobby, and looking for examples of how these lyrics have come to life. Lots of Booktokers see that connection and the similarity between the books that they're reading and Taylor Swift lyrics. They're making those kind of connections. This enemies to lovers trope, we've got two people who are falling in love despite initially sort of hating each other's guts, is really popular in this genre. It's about understanding the characters' flaws, which are introduced really early, and yet somehow they still manage to fall in love and accept each other's flaws. And it's kind of a bit of a play on the opposites attract, but it's that growth and it's that transition from one stage to another, and what that means sort of like practically and emotionally for the characters in the book, but also the readers who are then experiencing that with it. Booktokers are extremely vocal on what they're looking for in the enemy to lovers trope. Like, they believe that the tension and animosity adds more nuance to the relationship, but then sex is still the goal, right? We're not going to forget that this is kind of a big topic here. Some Booktokers sort of post scenes they'd like to read or scenes that they plan to include in the next book. So you've got a lot of readers who are, or Booktokers and readers who are then writing as well. And we get lots of comments about people using Wattpad to sort of publish their work and work on their writing. And we either get sort of people talking about sort of trying to add more to the scene with their ideas, asking if they can borrow a scene for their next book, or try to recommend books with similar scenes. So you get a dissection of the experience or the moment or the way that is being brought together, which is then taken out and then talked about, discussed, and then used and then reused and magpied and used in their own creative work. So in terms of the opportunities here for retailers, like highlight books recommended by Booktokers, including where to find the spicy ones. Make it easy. Use this as a channel. It's obvious, right? Set the book up. Make it easy. For authors and publishers here, the enemies to romance trope is super popular, and they've got lots of ideas about scenes they'd like to read. If you have an author that's struggling with ideas, get them to spend some time on Booktok in the comments section, and you're going to have loads of inspiration. There's a bit about Booktok that's kind of reflecting this idea of sort of sexual awakening. And this is a direct quote from the video that you can see in the main report, but I don't know how to tell you this, but we're all extremely horny. Booktokers are looking for books where sex is described as pleasurable in a vivid and detailed manner. It's like they need to get into the details here. It's super important, particularly for those people that this is all potentially extremely new and particularly scary. But right, it can't just be sex for sex's sake. There has to be a believable plot. We need a storyline. We need proper characters, and we need this visceral sense of attraction between the two of them. That's what we want, isn't it? This kind of like power of attractions, force. The enemy to lover is a thing the Booktokers like, but they don't like plots that glamorize sexual violence or involve toxic relationships. They're looking for content that's really female empowered and where the sex is mutually respectful. They want something that's well written. They don't want anything that's cringy or full of cliches or situations that are so unbelievably exaggerated they're never going to happen. Forget, this is about transition. It's not about fantasy. The fantasy element is there, but it's about transition from one stage of life to another. So it needs to be able to appeal. It needs to be able to resonate and to be understood and to be, I don't know, resonate's the right word, to really sort of hit that right core with the authors. Reading spicy content is a way for them to enjoy their sexual fantasies safely and privately. And if anyone's interested, here's a list of some spicy novels for you to enjoy in your own time. For authors, the lesson here or the opportunity here is that they're not looking for formulaic stories. That's really easy to say, okay, this book was really successful, let's cookie cutter it and do it again. They want characters that are authentic and written from the perspective of a woman, not a man trying to write from the perspective of a woman. Then there's this thing about, okay, what happens when mum finds out you're reading all these spicy novels? Well, for some, it's like mother, like daughter. A lot of Booktokers talk about their concern about their parents finding out their kind of guilty secret of the books that they're reading. And so they'll go to quite extreme lengths. So they're looking for covers or titles that got really benign covers, or where the title doesn't give anything away. And the book jackets are really subtle. They're not looking for this kind of like, I don't know, really explicit or really obvious or blatant marketing of the book. It needs to be subtle so it can fit under the radar. For some, it's not only their parents have to worry about, but you've got a little brother bursting in the room and who might then spill the beans to their parents. And others are comment about the fact that they're really pleased that their parents can't speak English very well, so they don't have to worry about it. Some, what they're doing is limiting their smart reading to Kindle, so it's easier to hide and to make secret. And then others are just really relieved when their parents don't seem to care what they're reading. Some mums are even reading the same book, but no one wants to talk about it at the dinner table. And the point here is there are different behaviors, and it's understanding that this desire for transition, this desire for awakening, this desire for growth, this move from childhood through young adult into adulthood is a scary time, and it happens within the context of family. And we need to understand that and appreciate that, and Booktok and the insights from it help us get more of a sense of how that's panning out. Okay. There's a couple of like behaviors that I want to just dip into a little bit, because they do some things that are kind of like just Booktokery type things. So I want to just kind of cover on that a little bit. Booktokers realize that they might be slightly obsessed with things, and they are worried what non-Booktokers or non-readers might think of them. That doesn't mean that on Booktok they are very happy to brag about all of the books that they own and what they do with them. So they love first edition. first front covers, and they talk about books that they've read, they've loved. They'll often show their shelves with books, without books, or an open space. And what you do when you show an empty space on TikTok is get people saying, "Oh, where are all your books?" And it just creates that kind of engagement and energy. Some booktoggers organize their books sideways in crazy fashions. They tuck them into every nook and cranny. They order them in certain ways. It feels like mess, but it's a form of engagement. What they're trying to do is express personality or start a conversation through the ways that they're organizing their books and showcasing their passion. And this whole thing, I can see it in the chat, a couple of people are saying, "I love this book," or "That's part of my group." And as soon as someone says, "Oh, I love this book," it gives someone else a space to go, "Oh, I love that book too." And you go, "Okay, what bit of it do you love?" "I love this bit." And it's just fascinating. Booktalkers are drawn to exciting displays of books in public spaces. So it's a really careful thing to think about when you're displaying it. What they do is when they found a post about someone who's obsessed with books, it makes them feel like they found their best friend. The only thing that's really holding them back is the lack of cash. So for retailers, booktalkers are looking for inspiration about how to display their own books. They'll often move books around in bookshops as well. And for publishers, it's all about paperbacks. For trilogies, they want to group them on their bookshelf by color, size, and any other form that they can think of. There's a trend in Booktok as well, which I want to touch on a little bit, which is around annotation, which is fascinating. So it's all about helping them recall what they've read, connect with other people, and immerse themselves more deeply into what they're reading. So Booktokers annotate. They write loads of crazy notes all the way through books, and there's loads of them. And what they're doing it to add meaning, help them remember, and to involve themselves deeper in the narrative. And so why are they doing this? Well, by writing and by annotating, by making notes and underlining, it makes them feel that they're more deeply in the book. It helps them get that deeper sense of engagement with it. And it also helps them feel that they own the book better. It's another way of sort of putting their stamp on it. They can also feel like annotations are a way of like joining the storyline, because they can write themselves in as characters in the story. It helps them remember interesting quotes and parts of the book. It's another way for them to express their love for it and to honor the story. When they sometimes will gift an annotated book to someone else, and they're saying, "That's like, I've given you a book, but what's more, I've given you a book with all of the things that I found precious about the book," which adds a whole new layer of meaning to it and makes that gift so much more personal, particularly to someone else who's got the same kind of tastes. And also, they will compare their annotations with friends to see what's different and what they picked up and what they didn't. So it's a really immersive kind of experience. These kits are selling out, right? So get the kits, sell the kits. Create space for annotations in the margins. Use paper that's not going to smudge when people are writing on them. And authors, that there's so much here for you to gain inspiration and guidance. So I'm just going to whiz through this one slightly wrong. There's no right or wrong way to annotate a book, okay? You can highlight passages, you can read specific passages, you can highlight the clever, spicy, or interesting bits, you can mark the edge, you can make a legend. And some of the things we've seen is like they'll use lots of different color post-it notes. So yellow stands for chapters they're still reading. It can mean funny, it can mean happy. Blue can be something that's unsettling or sad. Orange can be a bit of the book that's foreshadowing something else. So there's lots of richness and lots of meaning and lots of kind of like behaviors that they're getting involved with. How do they prefer to read? It's mostly kind of physical. The physicality of books seems to be winning out over Kindle. And the reason why is it's kind of quite an immersive process for them. So there's this joy of breaking the spine of a new book or stretching the spine. And they sort of realize that books aren't alive, but they still kind of feel a little bit guilty of personifying their books. And they think that the books look well read and not fresh off the press. They're the best. They're the ones that are most meaningful. But not just anyone can damage a booktoker's books. If they lend it to a friend, they expect it to come back in exactly the same condition. And there are two camps of booktokers regarding the type of paperback they prefer, floppy versus stiff. Floppy seems to be winning out. How do booksellers come into all of this? I've just got a couple more points to make before I let you all go. But Barnes & Noble is one of the few that we saw mentioned regularly that were coming up and that were seen to have really sort of jumped on the Booktok trend. And they're setting up in-store displays of books that have been recommended on Booktok. They're making it obvious. However, their reputation isn't like 100% glowing amongst booktokers. There's a lot of discussion around confusion with their membership scheme, which is messing with people's heads a little bit. They don't quite get it. One creator who joined Barnes & Noble came to realize that she actually has to do some work rather than just read all the time. Amazon, strangely, was rarely proactively mentioned as a place to buy books, although many of them do want to order their books immediately after reading. So this interesting thing, I'll be curious to see how TikTok continues to commercialize the elements, and just linking, I've read this book, I've seen this, how do I then, or I've got this recommendation, how do I then fulfill that demand, and how that's going to change e-commerce is interesting to me. Instead, what we're seeing against the Amazon is a tendency to want to prefer to support the local bookstops or sort of smaller bookshops. Sorry. So just conclude, really, just a couple of things. Sort of, I think for me, the audience is really fascinating. From when I started TikTok and when I talked to a lot of people about it, it's like, oh, I don't know anything about it. I haven't seen it. It seems a bit weird. It's just dancing videos, isn't it? And it's like, it's really time to stop that. That is a misconception that's really damaging. TikTok is enormous. It's the only growing social network at the moment of any size and scale. It's got enormous reach. There are communities on it for almost every topic. I hurt my knee recently, and there's loads of videos on it about how to repair the particular part of my knee that I damaged. Just download it, find a topic, spend some time with it. You need to immerse yourself into it, you need to get it. But for what we're trying to do is we recognize that it can bring together these amazing communities which are thriving, living, feeding off each other, creating their own dynamic. In commercial terms, that means demand signals. It means an audience that are activating demand amongst each other. And we're starting to see increasing different levels of different case studies across lots of different markets where this kind of communities coming together around a really passionate topic or a really engaging topic is then converting into significant demand. So just to summarize the Booktok, right, it was a tale as old as time, a hero rising from nothing to change everything. Booktok has shown us what happens when an audience finds each other. Within a few short years, Booktok has gone from absolutely nothing to the equivalent of everyone in the world having watched 7 Booktoks. That's 54 billion views. Out of the blue, it's plucked books from relative obscurity and thrust them onto the top seller lists. Booktok is a tribe of predominantly young adult girls exploring the transition to womanhood. They've come together to share a love of books that help them make sense of romance and spice and a minefield of human interactions. The interactions that they have on Booktok can help us understand this audience. It shows what motivates them and why. This creates a bunch of opportunities. For authors or content creators, it's a chance to relate to the needs of their audience and to pick up on things that are emerging and tropes that are being developed. For publishers, it's a chance to understand how and where to engage with a powerful demographic. And for retailers, it's an opportunity to gauge trends and shifting demand. Thanks so much for your attention. Apologies for the bit of background noise at my end. Love to hear any questions or any thoughts or observations. As I said, the report is available. Just drop us a line. Happy to share that. And yeah, thanks so much.